Hey, and welcome guys. Another video of a 3D print that I've done using my Bamboo A1 printer, filament printer, just using generic PLA, white in color as you can see here. Now this file is of the Star Wars Arquitens class light cruiser. We get to see that. I know it's different versions of it. I think it's in some of the animated shows, but this version I think is based off the one that we see in The Mandalorian, Moff Gideon's ship, I believe. So anyway, this file was found on Thingiverse, and it's already comes split up into 5 main sections, and also you have to print out the 4 different cannons or turrets that go on this ship. It's a nicely detailed ship with a lot of little paneling and nice details going on. There's actually a little, if you can get in there, there's a little TIE fighter kind of built into the hangar area. If I can get that in better focus, you can kind of make it out, but there's a little kind of half of a TIE fighter silhouette that's in there. I have printed out a smaller version. I don't think I made a video of that, however. So this one I scaled up to 275% of its original size. I wanted to go 300, but this 300 for this section, this was the tallest piece and was putting it just above my A1's height limits. So 275 put it well within that and gave it a little, probably could have gone like 295 or something. It was just barely touching, but 275 seemed like a decent number. Again, printed out really nice. I'm really happy with the quality of the print. Virtually, the layer lines are virtually invisible. As you can see, they were kind of printed in this orientation on all the different prints. I did have a few little issues. There was one for some reason. Oh yeah, for some reason on this one, if I can get that into focus for you, you can see and I'm not sure why there wasn't any stringing present, but there is a line, a void right here of several lines. So I don't know if that was maybe a slicing issue or something. I don't know. I probably could reprint it and get it to come out, but it's not that major, and I think a little putty work can fill that in and save me from having to print it, because otherwise it looks pretty nice. This is on the top side of the ship, so, but again, I think I can fill that in fairly easily, sand it, and I think it will be pretty much invisible time I get done. And so I think it was like a 15%. I just used the machine standard settings. If I think it was 15% infill, you'll be able to see a little bit more here. So I thought about trying to do a bunch of lighting on it, which would require me kind of hollowing out these parts. And PLA is actually a really tough material to kind of work with once you get it to print out. I mean, it's very durable, very strong. But it's a lot of drilling out to try to get to where I can maybe put some fiber optics on there. So I doubt I'm going to try to do that kind of lighting. However, I think I can, without too much hassle, put some engine lights to give our model at least a little bit of life. You know, I think the engine lights are kind of a good way to go. I got like these 3 main engines, and then you got like 4 smaller, I guess, auxiliary engines. And here you can see where I've already started trying to channel that out, and I'm using on my Dremel just some of these grinding bits right here to really kind of cut away at that plastic. But you can see some of the info in there, and it took a little bit just to kind of get that trimmed out. So I have to kind of come all the way over here into this 3rd engine, and but it's still, doesn't compromise the strength any. Still a very rigid piece of plastic there. So I'll be able to put all my lights and LEDs. I'm just going to use some pre-wired LEDs. I think I'm going to try to get some 10 millimeters in the center, and maybe some 3s in the smaller ones, and that should give us a nice lighting engine effect. So I'll have to run that through there, and I think from there I can just run 2 wires into where I'll eventually have the stand at, which I think is going to be connected here. There is a display stand that you can print out that kind of goes into these grooves. I don't know if I'm going to use that. I'll look at that. I haven't printed that out yet. And however, so it's really just a matter of joining these pieces up together and gluing them and then working on the seam line. So that'll take a little bit of work. So from here, I'm going to work on getting the rest of this kind of cleaned out on our drive section, get the LEDs in place, make sure they're all working, and then just going through the steps of getting it all connected. So basically you'll kind of have these pieces in here all lined up, and you'll end up being around 18 inches long once we're, I guess you want to see it, it'll be about 18 inches long once we get finished. It'll be a nice size. Again, even though it's scaled up, the detail is still pretty nice on it for this print. I did print out the guns, as you can see here, and they give you a couple of options you can do. I had a solid piece. Had problems with it had voids in the actual when I went to slice it. So I did print out, they give you an option to just kind of slice piece 2 parts of the turret. As you can see here, I've already glued these together with just a little bit of CA glue, and they look pretty good. Again, these are PLA, and I think even though this is a fairly small piece, I think it printed out pretty nicely. There's a little bit of stringy between the barrels that I'll have to clean out. That's not just, a little bit of sanding should take care of that. But I think they actually look really good. I thought about resin printing them, but I'm happy enough with how these look. And of course, these will go on the front part of the ship. You got 2 on the top, and then you got some spaces down here for 2 on the bottom. So I'm going to work on that, and we'll come back once we kind of get the lighting hooked up on our drive section. Here's the section where I had the flaws in my print on the sides. As you can see here, I've already pulled the tape off. And again, I'm just using a bit of this Bondo glazing spot putty. And you can see where I've masked it off, and I've just kind of smeared it into the gap there. So let's just take a look. I've given this plenty of time to dry, actually overnight. And so when you tape it off, it helps keep that a lot more cleaner. You're not having as much to clean off. And then just take some sanding paper or sticks or files or something, and now I'm just going to start kind of leveling. This is 320. See if I can not shake the table up. Basically, I'm just going to smooth it down to where it kind of matches the surrounding detail of the ship. There's a groove right here, so I'm going to take my sanding paper, kind of fold it into a little circle to kind of get into that groove to make it match. I'm just going to clean that up, and when I prime over it, it might be a little bit noticeable, but you're definitely not going to have that void or gap there. So I think that's going to work out good enough to fill that gap. All right, as you can see here, I have my drive section, and I now have my holes drilled out for my LEDs that are going to go in there. I have just kind of cleaned out to where I can do all the wiring. Still doesn't affect the strength of this particular part. It's pretty thick otherwise. So I'm putting 2 different sizes. I have 10 millimeter holes, and I have some 3 millimeter holes. I have these pre-wired LEDs, bright white. They're both bright white. Some 3 millimeters and 10 millimeters. You can see here I've taken some sandpaper and kind of sanded the front part of that just to help diffuse the light and kind of brighten the whole thing. And this will fit kind of like that in there. And I've already tested it. Looks pretty good. And of course we'll have 4 of these 3 millimeter ones like that. That will fit in there. So quite a bit of work with those grinding wheels to clean all that out. And just a little bit of a tool, if you don't have one of these, the stepper bit here, you can see, I don't know if you can see, but it's actually marked right here. You got 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and there's a bunch of different sizes, but I use this tool pretty much every project to drill holes such as this, but also in my display bases for the light switches I use. Typically this is big enough. Like I said, I have a couple of these. One of them's a little bit bigger, but very useful. Now I did drill in a pilot hole. For the 3 millimeter ones, I use this 3 millimeter drill bit to just kind of drill out the center. But I did a pilot hole in the middle and then used this to kind of drill through. The only thing you have to be careful of, it is a pretty aggressive bite to this drill bit, so if you have some thin plastic, it may kind of twist that plastic around. Didn't have any issues with that. Drilled through nicely. I have some nice round holes that fit my LEDs good. I've also drilled some holes, again, using this drill bit, just to kind of come in and drill a place. And all I need is just running my wires. I'm not going to try to do like window lighting or anything like that. It's just too much to try to channel out and do all that, and this is more of a fun project, not one of these kind of detailed projects that I'm going to be investing a lot of time. Here we have this section. This is close to the center of ballot, or the midsection that our ship will be in. You can see where I've drilled in a hole for that, and I have this brass pipe, pretty thick walled, pretty strong, that I will glue in here. I'll use some 2-part epoxy, kind of glue that into place. So I'm going to wire up my engine section. What I'm going to do first for a wire is I'm going to go ahead and paint in this section. I'm going to prime it, probably put a light blocking coat of black over it, and then do whatever kind of white color I'm going to be doing for the ship, and kind of do around here. That way I can go ahead and pre-install the engines once it's painted. I don't have to worry about trying to mess. It's these concave shapes can be difficult, and it'll just be painted and I won't have to worry about that. So that's going to be a process. So I'm going to do that and get it all wired up, and we'll come back and look at it after that. All right, as you can see, I have the drive section here with now all the LEDs installed and kind of hot glued into place. Now, I did go ahead and paint this section so I won't have to worry about trying to mask off these weird shapes, these concave shapes of the LEDs and the little ones in there. And basically, I first kind of primed the back end with this little bit of this sandable primer from Iron Armor. I then put on let that dry, put on a flat black coat of spray paint. This is HCEX. This is the cheap stuff from Home Depot. It actually sprays pretty nicely. And from there, with that black coat, I did my primary coat, and this is acrylic paint from Anita's called Pastel Taupe. And of course, I strain it. I add a few drops of alcohol that helps kind of dissolve any clumps or any thickness in the paint, along with some dishwashing detergent, not detergent, but dish soap to help with the viscosity of the paint. Put a little screw, or put the paint inside of here. I've talked about this many times. And once you get it thinned down to like a milky substance, it actually sprays pretty nice. I've done it many times, and I'll continue to use it. However, so I've sprayed that primary coat on there, so now I don't have to worry. You can see I didn't bother doing all of this because I still have to do a lot of connecting of the other pieces. I attached all my LEDs, the 3 10mm and the 4 3mm are all now attached, and I basically kind of grouped them all together and condensed them down into one wire that'll run through the body, and then just did a little bit of hot glue. That's plenty of space to kind of get those wires kind of bunched in there. Just make sure you test all the connections many times. Make sure you have good solid connections before you finalize. Put it on this long wire that'll be running through half the length of the ship. And so from here, I can kind of run my wires through the holes I drilled. And then I'll have to, I believe this is the top section here, because this is where I had the flaws in the print. And there's still work to do, but those come along and see where there's a little bit of glue that I can see, and I can just sand that down. But from here, I'll be attaching this. That's why I didn't bother painting all this, because it's gonna take a lot of filling to get that seam line to go away. But it's just a matter of kind of connecting the parts at this point. This will run up through the middle. Now here I have the front end of the ship, and it is connected with one of the mid sections. And I've been working on the seams here, and everything's looking pretty good. There was some little bit of a gap on the ends. Took some of this very thin styrene plastic to kind of help deal with that gap and strengthen the very end of it. Mixed in with a little CA glue and a little bit of baking soda in the gaps. And so I think that is coming along pretty nicely. You can see where I've now attached my support rod that my wires will be running through. And of course I just drilled a hole fit through there. I pushed the rod, I kind of pushed it all the way up and kind of poured in some hot glue around it and then pulled it down quite a bit. So the glue was being pulled into the actual opening of the hole to kind of support that. Once I got that in place, there was a little bit of gaps around my hole was a little bit bigger than the tube. And I put some baking soda and some super glue, and it seems to be a very strong bond right now. Quite a bit of plastic that is going through, and with the CA glue and the hot melt glue, very strong bond. I know a lot of people don't use hot glue that way. I've never had issues with it. I have models I've had for years that I've done that and still have no issues with it. So it's not supporting a whole lot of weight, and it's actually a very strong bond. However, to each his own. So from here, we have to connect all. It's just a matter of connecting the pieces now, and that's going to take a lot of work because each section I'll have to address the seam line created between the gaps. So I have to connect. I probably will connect this part to this one. Well, it just depends. It really doesn't matter. I know I'm going to connect this while this is attached, and ultimately I'll be running that line through there. Shouldn't be too hard. I can see the opening through there, and if all else fails, I can run the wire through here and pull it out and then connect it back to that one. So we'll just come back once we get these shipped all into one piece. All right, I have my model all put together here. The completed model is 18 inches long, which makes it a really nice size, kind of on the large size. There's still some work to do. As you can see, I've did some priming. My seam across here is pretty much invisible. If you really look, you probably figure it out. But the way I'm attaching all the pieces is just using CA glue. Got a couple different glues that I'm using to do my initial joint. I'm using this super glue HFT that I got from Harbor Freight, I guess. But I also have some of this extreme power thin and extreme power medium, and mostly using the thin along with combination with some baking soda or baking powder, and very fine in here. So what I do is I initially line it up using the this tube glue. This is more of a thicker type of glue. Put it around, I join the pieces, kind of hold them into place while the glue sets, and then of course see where the gaps are going to be. Now the best joint was right here. You have some raised detail, which kind of makes a natural seam line, so I really just had to kind of align this top part, and it actually came together pretty well, so not much on that. The front part I think I've already talked about, connecting this part right here. By far the worst joint was right across the middle between the sections. The bridge wasn't too bad. There is a seam right here, which I'm going to just kind of keep as a natural seam line. Hopefully it'll passes as a natural seam line, but you can see where I'm taking that baking powder, putting it in the gaps using the extra thin, which is basically almost like a water, and letting it run in there, and then using some Insta-Set to set that, and then sand it down. It's also helpful to have some kind of debonder. I have this uncure to help get rid of excess CA glue. But the worst part was kind of in this bottom section. You had some ins and outs, and the line's still showing pretty well there, but it's actually some CA glue. Now once I get it primed over, there'll be some more addressing of these seams, but overall I think we're in pretty good shape. And I went ahead and attached my guns because I wanted to glue them to the plastic and not to a painted surface, so they are now attached on our ship. So from here I'm going to prime it up and see what corrections I need to make. All right, you can see here I have my cruiser in primer, and I'm ready to move on to my next steps. A lot of work, sanding, priming several times. Pretty heavy coats of filler primer that really helps to cover up the layer lines and covers a multitude of sins there. But there was quite a bit of sanding, coming back and filling in small gaps. I didn't want my seam lines to be just look at it and they just blare out. They're mostly covered over, just kind of looking over it. You don't really see, but if you really get close, there are, some blemishes. Probably the worst spots are kind of right in this section on the bottom. I worked on that quite a bit. It kind of is what it is. Fortunately, it's on the bottom. I spent most of my time really cleaning up this top section, kind of along right here and here. This section right in here was the most troublesome part of the ship. But as you can see, it's now in primer. I'm going to put a flat black coat over it, and then we're going to go in with our top coat and get that painted. So I'll come back once we get that top coat on. And before that, I am working on my display base. Just one of these wood frames here. You can get these on Amazon, pretty cheap. I think I got like a pack of 5 or 6 for $10 or $12, something like that. I don't remember the exact price. Now, as you see here, I have an Imperial emblem printed out. I originally printed out a flat one that I found on Thingiverse, just to kind of give some detail to my display stand. However, I wanted some more support. This is, I'll have to see if I can figure it out, but it has a little bit of heft to it. I mean, there's a lot of plastic right there. I'm not sure of the exact weight. So I wanted something to kind of stabilize it. So I took my Imperial emblem into Tinkercad and added on this dome here. And also I measured out my supporting rod and went ahead and opened that up to where I'd have this kind of inch long space here that would support my ship. As you can see here, I've drilled a hole. The hole and the wood is a little bit smaller, so when I insert the supporting rod, it will connect with the bottom of the wood, and so I kind of have a natural stance. I've already put it on. It's level-ish, pretty level. And you can see here where I put my on and off. This is my simple on and off button. I drilled a hole. You can see the wiring in there. I had to kind of bend them down. So I'll probably put some felt pads on here as I normally do on some of my projects, just so it kind of sits better and doesn't shuffle around. But I'm going to paint this up, maybe try to paint the inside of the emblem a little bit. Of course, I'll have to remove this on-off switch where I paint it, and we'll get that done. So, and we'll just come back once I get the primer coat or the primary coat on our cruiser. All right, well, here's my finished Arquitens Light Cruiser, my 3D printed model. Came up to just over 18 inches long, and I got it all finished up and mounted on my display base. Now, the display base, as I talked about, I modified this Imperial emblem, put this whole dome with the opening in the middle, and it pressure fitted really nice in there. Now, I did put a little bit of super glue, and it pressure fitted so nicely, it was kind of holding on its own. I'll turn on the engines in just a minute. And got our light switch right there, obviously. Now to finish up, my primary coat was this pastel taupe from Anita's, and I had thinned that down, using some distilled water, a few other things. I've talked about this several times, so I won't keep repeating myself. But I actually went through a whole one of these and then probably half more to get this painted. Now, the reason it took so much is I painted the whole thing with very light coats over a black kind of a primer coat. I did a gray primer, then a black undercoat, and then my top coat to kind of let that black do some shadowing. And so it took some coats to kind of get the white back in. However, I did do some weathering with some oil washes, and I just didn't like how it looked. It just didn't turn out. There's something just kind of funky about it and didn't look appropriate. So I went back over some more of my primary coat, the taupe, and to kind of get it back to kind of a really clean looking ship. And I'm really happy, and sometimes he has to know where to stop with it. It's a very white looking ship, and so I'm happy with how this has turned out. My seam lines are pretty much gone. If you really look, you can kind of make them out. but you have to really look for it. They're not blaringly obvious. Sometimes you see that in 3D print, especially filament printed kits. And you're dealing with layer lines. Layer lines are pretty much gone. So it's turned out to be a really nice print. I'm going to cut my engine lights on and really happy with how that looks. Let me lower the camera down so you can get a kind of a better look on that. And it's my camera that's crooked, not the engine. So let's see if I can, there we go, that's kind of more appropriate. Really happy how that engine light effect came out. I think it gives some life to the model. It was just going to be too much work to try to dig out all that. Just wasn't invested that much into this project to try to trench out everything and get some fiber optics or whatnot. It would have been nice, but for me, this wasn't the project that I want to invest that kind of time. But I'm glad I did the engine lights, and I think they turned out really nice. It just has a really nice look. I think it's pretty close to what you kind of see in the show, from what I can remember. That kind of hue. Now it's a little bit more blue on the camera than it is in person, but still really nice with the 10 millimeter lights and the 3 millimeter lights, kind of differentiate, making it a little bit different between the different types of engines. I guess you have your primary engines and auxiliaries. So really happy with all that. And that's just being powered by a single 9-volt battery. And I think, a alkaline 9-volt battery powering these 7 would probably last many hours. I'm not sure exact time, but I don't have to plug it in and worry about it running down anytime soon. It's actually been on quite a bit as I've been taking pictures and filming and doing things of that nature. The finish of the display base here, as you can see here, I took the emblem has kind of a metal look to it, and very simply I just took some of this silver leaf rub and buff, put it on a little bit of a cloth, and just rubbed it in there. Kind of give it a brushed metal worn look to it. Very simple, but I think it has a nice look to it. Again, it's one of those projects where I didn't want to invest a whole lot of time, but I still want to look kind of nice. And I think that kind of achieved that effect with the 3D printed base on top of the wood. The wood, I did some primers and base coats and clear coats. I think I finished up with a satin coat that kind of looked the best on it. And then, of course, my battery's mounted underneath, and very simple wires through the switch that goes in between your battery and your, of course, your model. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the project. Until next time, everybody have a good one.